This is a republic, if you can keep it, with Mark Brewer and Jeff Timmer.
I'm Jeff Timmer. Welcome to the State of Delusion episode of A Republic If You Can Keep It. The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. We opened last week's podcast with those words from George Orwell's prescient dystopia novel 1984. On Tuesday, Donald Trump lived those words in a gibbering, rambling, bitter, divisive, partisan, and lie-filled 1 hour, 47-minute diatribe. The speech was boycotted by dozens of Democrats and a majority of the U.S. Supreme Court. And based on the TV ratings, the majority of Americans also boycotted the speech.
I'm Olson, sitting in for Mark Brewer. Newly elected Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger, in the official Democratic response, summed up Trump in one very biting paragraph.
Congress, we did not hear the truth from our president. So let's speak plainly and honestly. And let me ask you, the American people watching at home, 3 questions. Is the president working to make life more affordable for you and your family? Is the president working to keep Americans safe both at home and abroad? Is the president working for you?
A day later, Governor Whitmer offered her 8th and final State of the State assessment here in Michigan, grounded in reality and a reflection of someone whose approval ratings is at least 15 points higher than Trump's. Multiple polls show a stunning 60% plus of Americans say Trump sucks, while Whitmer's approval rating has consistently been in the mid to low 50s. Whitmer's speech focused on kitchen table issues like affordability, medical debt, housing, and literacy. She somehow forgot to label Republicans as low IQ or crazy, lunatics, or responsible for all of Michigan's problems. She didn't once blame her predecessor, Rick Snyder, for anything. But she did take the opportunity to brag about Michigan athletes dominating the U.S. medal count at the Winter Olympics. And she even high-fived House Speaker MAGA Matt Hall for working collaboratively on sick time legislation. The contrast between those two speeches frame this week's discussion. Later in the podcast, we'll be joined by 2 anti-authoritarian experts to discuss an issue facing many American families and neighbors: how we can talk with each other in this era of way too often angry partisan divisions, and why it's so critical that we do that.
You know, Jeff, we've got a whole bunch of other topics we could do a full podcast on if it wasn't for those 2 major stories. Some of the things on our radar this week in more normal times that we would spend the whole podcast on include the appearance that Donald Give Me the Nobel Peace Prize Trump is on the verge of starting a war with Iran, a war that could rival the Iraq and Afghanistan wars in futility and further alienate the United States from the rest of the world. This comes just 6 months after Trump claimed to have obliterated nuclear weapons capabilities in Iran. Apparently, obliteration has a short shelf life.
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
The Epstein cover-up has become even more evident with the revelation this week that dozens of documents pointing directly at Donald Trump, including allegations of sexually assaulting a 13-year-old girl, those documents have been hidden by the utterly corrupt Attorney General Pam Bondi. The Republicans on Capitol Hill are more interested in the Clintons, with Bill and Hillary dragged in front of the House Oversight Committee this week for depositions that will keep the Epstein story in the headlines, but provide little else.
After the Supreme Court told him his tariffs were illegal, Trump has doubled down by imposing a 10%, then a 15% tariff on imports. I think that's where it is at this point. If, as Trump says, those tariffs would replace the federal income tax, which it won't, it would be a huge financial windfall for the highest income taxpayers, his billionaire buddies shifting the tax load to low and middle income families. But don't worry about it, it ain't going to happen.
Republicans are pushing to pass a bill in Washington to combat what they call voter fraud, very non-existent and virtually never happens. The so-called SAVE Act would, in reality, be burdening millions of Americans as they exercise their right to vote by requiring them to show extra proof of citizenship in order to register to vote. The proof, either a birth certificate or a passport. Millions of American citizens, including low-income folks, minorities, seniors, and get this, women who may have changed their last name or have a last name different from the one they were born with would have to jump through hoops and incur costs to comply and register to vote.
America's favorite stand-up comedian, FBI Director Kash Patel, spent $1 million or more of taxpayer money for a thinly disguised junket to the Olympics, culminating with chugging beer with the victorious U.S. men's hockey team. Of course, he claimed it was official business as an excuse for his trip so that you and I can pick up the tab.
New polling this week shows the race for governor in Michigan appears to be a statistical tie, with Democrat Jocelyn Benson narrowly leading Republican John James and Independent Mike Duggan. But the polling raises questions, especially because the poll was commissioned by supporters of Mike Duggan. The poll assumes James will be the survivor of a four-way race. He's the most prominent name so far in the field. But with 78-year-old Perry Johnson promising now to spend $10 million over the next few weeks in a statewide advertising blitz, things are going to change.
Meanwhile, in the legislature, they're actually working on policy. Legislation has been introduced to limit the use of artificial intelligence to monitor workplace activity.
Employee monitoring and workplace surveillance software has already become a multi-billion-dollar industry. Artificial intelligence has made these technologies more invasive, more widespread, and more all-encompassing to the point where your employer can track how many times per day you need to visit the restroom and how long it takes you to complete that visit to the restroom.
State Representative Penelope Cernoglu joined with Michigan's AFL-CIO President Ron Beaver to warn of abuses already happening as some employers use AI to monitor everything from computer activity to bathroom breaks.
Republican State House Speaker Matt Hall is floating the idea of a property tax relief plan that is funded by enacting a new tax on services, everything from medical bills and legal bills and haircuts to country club memberships could be part of this new tax. This was an idea that was once promoted unsuccessfully by Jennifer Granholm.
And the Department of Homeland Security says ICE officers will not interfere with voting precincts in November, but a lot of people are skeptical given the history of voting fraud conspiracy promoters that are making the promise and the history of everybody at Homeland Security just flat out lying to the American people. We shall see, we shall see. Jeff, why don't we start with the marathon speech by Donald Trump? 107 minutes of anger, lies, partisan attacks, and rambling stories. The consensus seems to be that the speech had a lot of words, but not much substance. I did a little research on this. George Washington's first State of the Union address, when he first became president and was actually starting the government, was 1,079 words. The Gettysburg Address, 272 words. Donald Trump, 1,617 words in 107 minutes, and he said less than either Washington or Lincoln.
There's always a lot of focus on a State of the Union or in states, the governor's State of the State speech. But I have a take that these speeches are almost always, and maybe always, irrelevant. They don't really matter in the scheme of things. There's a whole lot of attention and spotlight on them, and then they're forgotten afterwards. If you
Barack
remember,
Obama agrees with you on that, by the way.
Yeah. Well, if you go back to 2024, after his last State of the State or State of the Union speech, Joe Biden was getting, oh my gosh, where has this Joe Biden been? He came out and gave the best fiery speech of his life. He was on top of his game. Everyone was like, wow, I can't believe they've got this Joe. Where's this Joe Biden been? I heard he was old. I heard he was feeble. Well, by the June debates, we saw that Joe Biden that year. I dare too many people to say anything memorable, anything earth-shattering or paradigm-shifting or policy shifting that has occurred as a result of any State of the State or State of the Union address in it's just even if they come out as Trump has done now on 5 different occasions and make what amount to gibbering, delusional armpit, fart noises with his mouth.
You sure it was his armpit?
Well, yeah. You never know. I mean, Trump's probably soiling himself, but there's a lot of attention put on these. Reporters love to talk about them. They love to do panels of voters afterward to see how people react to them, focus groups. It's all a bunch of I think, artifice that really doesn't have any impact and outcome on the trajectory of an election that is happening. And it's not likely to this year. If you're a Republican in Washington or anywhere on the ballot in this country this year, including in deep red states, you have to be, if you're sane, if you are somewhat sentient and connected to reality, you have to be worried about your electoral chances. And Donald Trump's speech did nothing whatsoever to change the trajectory that is decidedly against the Republicans running for office this year, especially in close and competitive races or close and competitive states like Michigan. He arguably threw more gas on the fire with his Trump-like theatrics that his fans and his acolytes and the cult members loved him to do. But the rest of America, more than 60% of Americans, give Trump a failing grade on his job performance. They are tired. The Trump fatigue is real, and it is growing. Trump gets out there at every event and preaches to the choir. He does nothing to add to his coalition. Successful politics, even in especially in midterm elections, when the president is not on the ballot and his party always suffers losses, they have to do something to appeal to those voters that are going to decide the elections. It's not going to be the MAGA cult voters and Republican primary voters who decide who wins the Michigan governor's race in November, decides who the next U.S. senator is going to be in Michigan or in Arizona or in Georgia or any of these states. He is so upside down, not just on his job approval, but on every issue, including the issues that have been most important to his winning coalition in his two successful elections in 2016 and in 2024. He's way upside down, almost 20 points in the hole on his performance on economic issues. And he is now way underwater on immigration issues, because even those who voted for his immigration platform during the campaign are watching this immigration policy turn into real action over the last 13 months. And they're saying, this is not what I voted for. I did not vote for this thuggery, this amped up, steroid-ridden, mall cop rejects with anger issues and no training to come out and start throwing around Americans, harassing Americans, killing Americans in at least now 3 cases, the 2 in Minnesota and 1 that's now been reported. It occurred earlier last year in Texas. This is not what people voted for, and they've had enough. And this is why Democrats, it's not that there's been like a big shift, like suddenly everybody is like in America thinks they're Democrats now. They are decidedly rejecting Trump and the Republicans. And the only real beneficiary of that is Democratic candidates. And we've seen it in special election after special election, dozens of times through 2025 and early 2026. We saw it in the regular elections in states like New Jersey and Virginia and Mississippi that have off-year elections to elect their governor and legislators and other offices, where Democrats are outperforming the performance of Republicans as recently as 2024 by 10, 12, 15, 20, 30 points in some of these districts.
Yeah, we even saw it in Saginaw a couple weeks ago.
If Republicans running for Congress in Trump plus 15 districts have to be worried about, man, this is a kind of year where I could lose to a Democrat, that means every single Republican member of Congress from Michigan is potentially vulnerable. Now, I'm not saying that they're all going to be swept out of office. You have to have quality candidates. You have to have money in campaigns. But if I'm the Democrats looking at the open John James seat, I'm salivating. That seat is ripe for the taking. Tom Barrett, the freshman Republican MAGA kook who won the race to succeed Alyssa Slotkin in mid-Michigan, Tom Barrett's days in Congress are numbered. If I'm Bill Huizenga, who's never faced a real credible challenge from a Democrat, Sean McCann is arguably favored today to win that election given the trajectory of the overall climate. And even races like members of Congress like Tim Walberg or Lisa McClain or John Molinar or Jack Bergman in the Upper Peninsula in northern Michigan, where there's a whole lot of infighting among Republicans. Republican legislators all across that district are at war with the congressmen, an open war between them, dividing up Republican support and loyalties. That could be an area that suddenly becomes competitive in a wave year. I'm not saying that it's one that everybody should, the Democrats should start investing heavily in or anything like that. You still have to be smart about resources and opportunities, but it's the kind of district to look at. And so when we look at what kind of climate is out here, we're talking about the State of the Union address and how Trump did nothing to reset this wind that's blowing, like gale force approaching hurricane force in the face of these Republicans who are running for office. They're going to be in real trouble. There's just 8 months until Election Day, and this cake is getting really baked. There's nothing that Trump or the Republicans can do to really change this paradigm. And they're talking about digging the hole deeper. The economic policies, the tariffs that have caused so much of this economic malaise and stagnation and anxiety. People can vote. If people can realize what they see, what they hear, and what they spend, they know that their family budgets and their bank accounts they're paying more for everything, not less under
Ask
Trump.
the auto workers at Stellantis that aren't going to be getting bonuses this year.
No bonuses at Stellantis, and significantly diminished bonuses at Ford and GM. Wages are not keeping up with inflation. Inflation is higher under Trump's first year than it was in the last year of Joe Biden's. The GDP is growing at a much more contracted, smaller rate in Trump's first year than it did under any year that Joe Biden was president. Things cost more. These tariffs that Trump has hinged his entire illiterate economic plan on are paid by American consumers and American businesses.
And they know it.
And they know it. They absolutely know it. They know that they're paying more. He can talk about $1.85 gas. No one in America is paying $1.85 for a gallon of gas. They all know it's bullshit. And he stands up there and says it. And then the Fox News and all the right-wing acolytes out there start talking about how cheap gas prices. And people say, find me where this phantom unicorn rainbow store is where I can buy gas for $1.85. It's just all nonsense. And the Republicans are in a shitload of trouble in this election year. And they seem to be either blissfully ignorant of it or just whistling past the graveyard as they head to a shellacking in November.
Three things stood out to me in the speech as I watched the reports of it. I didn't watch the speech itself. I had better things to do. I think I needed to get my hair washed or something. But first of all, he upstaged himself with the hockey team. That was the number one story coming out of that State of the Union. Number two, there's video of members of Congress falling asleep during the speech, which was fascinating. His claim that grocery prices are coming down, he said, beef prices, they're really coming down. You know how much it costs for a hamburger this week at Meijer? About $7.50 a pound.
Yeah.
It's absolutely incredible. And it just goes on. He's totally detached from reality. He claims, or his staff claims, that he watches news from all sorts of sources, but he seems to be in that Fox News bubble. I did watch the pregame show on Fox for a little bit, and it was like an alternative universe with the things that they were talking about. But he lost that opportunity completely to reach out beyond his base, and even his base isn't buying some of his bullshit. And I can't imagine they had the attention span to watch the entire speech. It was just a total disaster for him. It will be forgotten. The reality, I mentioned earlier that Barack Obama didn't like the State of the Union speech. I was watching an interview on Kimmel after the speech, and they had the Pod Save America guys on, two of whom wrote most of Obama's State of the Union speeches. And Kimmel asked them, how did you guys feel about the State of the Union? They said, we hated them. They're a royal pain in the ass. How did the president feel? He hated them. They were a total waste of his time. The reality is, as you say, they're pretty meaningless.
Yeah, they don't move the needle.
There are very few memorable points. I can think of maybe the only one that stands out to me in my mind right now, and I haven't researched it, was the Four Freedoms, I think, came in a FDR State of the Union.
Yeah, and that's nearly 100 years ago.
Yeah, well,
So, I mean,
I was alive then. So.
yeah, well, yeah. You were doing radio back in those days.
Yeah, I
But,
was doing a talk show back then.
But-
Me and Father Coughlin were on the radio.
yeah, right. So I guess if we're going back before World War II to find the last one anybody remembers, there hasn't been a lot of memorable news that have come out of States of the Union addresses over time.
The governor's speech was interesting too. The high five with Matt Hall was hilarious. I don't think Matt saw that one coming. But she was so nice. She called out a lot of Republicans, not to criticize them like Trump, but to thank them for their work and for their public service, even when she disagreed with them. The first one right out of the bat was a state senator from the Upper Peninsula, Republican.
Yep.
And she constantly mentioned both Republicans and Democrats that she had worked with. Her message was very clearly, we can't get things done in government. We can't reach compromises if we work at it honorably. And I think that was aimed at Mike Duggan as much as anything else.
Well, one thing that has made Gretchen Whitmer so successful, and the reason her job approval numbers have always been favorable in the mid to low 50s, at the worst, reaching 60% on her best day, is that she has reached across the political aisle in that center divide to forge some kind of consensus and compromise with Republicans. She had no choice during her first term when she had a Republican-controlled legislature. For part of her second term, she had a completely Democratic-controlled legislature, but now she has divided control in the House and then the Senate, and so she's recognizing the political reality here. She needs Republican votes this year to do anything, and she is going to try to accomplish the rest of her agenda as she laid out there and leave Michigan better than it was back in 2018 or 2019 when she assumed office. And so she needs Republican votes to do that. And she has done a great job of speaking past a lot of Republicans in Lansing to voters who might be Republicans, but have also voted for Gretchen Whitmer or support a lot of the positions she has taken on things.
It's sort of the same way that Alyssa Slotkin has become so successful so quickly.
Absolutely.
Alyssa told me early on that her goal was to convert Republicans in Oakland County. Not a lot of them, but enough of them so she'd win, and that's exactly what she did. And Whitmer probably learned from her days in the legislature. When she was the minority leader of the state Senate, one of her closest friends was the majority leader, Randy Richardville. They got along just great.
Days. Yeah.
They honestly liked each other. They could work together. They could disagree a lot, but it never got to the point of being called low IQ or dumb or pathetic or you should be ashamed or anything. It was just an honest disagreement. Back in the day when you were still a Republican, you used to do that all the time. And you would do it, and you and Brewer became two very close friends, and I got into the circle as well. And I don't think the three of us agree on much of anything when it comes to policy, but it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't. And that's the way politics has typically worked. People can adhere to their policy principles. The thing to do is agree on the problem. Okay, we have a problem with elementary school reading in Michigan. One person has an idea on how to fix that. A Republican has an idea on how to fix that. A progressive Democrat has an idea on how to fix that. Those ideas aren't going to all just happen. You have to come up with some kind of consensus. Okay, we can try this, we can try that, we can agree on the problem, we can disagree on how we fix it, but we try. And that is something that we've lost in not just the last decade. I mean, it's been eroding for a couple of decades, really since the proliferation of cable news and the internet and the what has been a great democratization of news delivery, like we do here on the Republic, if you can keep it. But it also has allowed people to tune out sources of news and information that aren't pleasing to them or make them question their beliefs or worldview, where you say they're getting, when you tune into Fox, in this alternate reality.
More on A Republic, if you can keep it, after these messages.
When most of us think about polling, the focus is on those campaign polls telling us which candidates are winning. But the most important polls are for businesses, local governments, and nonprofits assessing the needs and wants of their customers or constituencies.
Those are polls that guide policies and lead to institutional success. Those polls have to get it right, which makes the choice of a public opinion research firm critical. Epic MRA has been trusted for more than 4 decades to get it right. Our clients have included school boards, statewide nonprofits, corporations, as well as the candidates and news media who rely on us during political campaigns. Whether it's just a couple of questions or a full in-depth survey, we're here and ready to help.
You can reach us at epicmra.com.
Are you looking to stay ahead of the curve on Michigan's public policy landscape? Look no further than Michigan Information and Research Service Incorporated, or MERS. MERS is your go-to source for comprehensive, nonpartisan news and analysis on Michigan's government and public policy. But that's not all. A MERS subscription also gives you access to our powerful legislative monitoring and tracking tools. Stay on top of every bill, amendment, and vote with real-time updates, detailed reports, interactive committee transcripts, legislative analysis tools, and more. Whether you're a policymaker, lobbyist, or just a concerned citizen, MERS keeps you informed with daily updates, exclusive interviews, and detailed reports. Subscribe today and gain access to our extensive archives. Stay informed, stay engaged, and stay ahead with MERS. Visit MERS.news to learn more and subscribe. That's MIRS.news. Don't miss out on the insights that matter most.
Hi, Ben Franklin here with a message from our finance department. They've put together a small, exclusive collection of really bitchin' merch for you. We've got our exclusive Trump's Favorite Podcast mug, perfect for those long days of reading through the latest administration indictments. We've got mugs for lovers of sanity, mugs for opponents of dumb fuckery, and finely tailored shirts for lovers of getting dressed. Just head over to the merch store on our website. This square thingy will take you there, or click on the merch store button on arepublicpodcast.com. Support democracy, support freedom, wipe out dumb fuckery. Franklin, out.
We've all been there, going to the Sunday family dinner that always devolves into a debate about Trump. A few of my extended family members are MAGA to the point where we avoid politics completely or we'd come to blows. Scrolling through Facebook, encountering that childhood friend whose feed has become a minefield of MAGA memes, it is infuriating. For a decade, the conventional wisdom for surviving the American political divide has been, don't go there. We've treated political topics like radioactive waste, best left buried for the sake of the relationship.
The folks at the Democracy Investment Fund think that silence is costing us more than we realize. Their new free app, Listen to You, LSTN numeral 2U, is a bet on a radical idea that we can actually talk to each other again, provided we stop trying to always win and be right. Listen to You isn't a social media network or news aggregator. It's essentially a flight simulator for difficult conversations. The free, nonpartisan app provides a judgment-free digital resource where users can practice realistic dialogue. We're joined by the two people behind this optimistic approach to bridging our political divide, my friends and Lincoln Project colleagues, Erin Dobson and Trygve Olson. Erin Dobson and Trygve Olson, welcome to A Republic If You Can Keep It. I want to kind of turn this over to you folks to explain this new tool that you have to help Americans. We're finding ourselves clearly in the most partisan, polarized climate we've been in our lifetimes, and maybe ever. I want to kind of tell us about the problem, why this is adding to the divide, why it's exacerbating, why it's important to try to bridge this, how this will help in the long run. And then we can talk about the Listen to You app, the new tool that you guys have developed to give everyday people some tools and ability to go have these difficult conversations, not just at Thanksgiving, but whenever they are encountering friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, in having these conversations, or in some cases avoiding those conversations that they probably need to have in order to ever kind of rebuild, put Humpty Dumpty back together here, this state of democracy that we have that is laying shattered on the ground in the United States right now. Let's talk about this. Let's give us some hope for the future. I'll let you guys go from here.
Well, thanks, Jeff and Walt, for having us on. We really appreciate it. The title of your show is really appropriate, particularly since one of the fundamental ways to keep the republic is to have people be able to have conversations and actually talk about their differences in a way that's productive. The tool was built not necessarily to help get you to persuade someone to believe the way you do. It's really a tool that helps you have a more productive conversation and maybe makes you pause about how you might come across when you're having those conversations as well. One of the things that we learned along the way with all of our research is oftentimes people don't realize that the way they approach the conversation is actually the thing that derails it. So, I think it's important for us all to take a step back and be thoughtful about how we're approaching these conversations. I'll let Trygve go into some of the story about how we got here and all of that.
If we're going to save the republic at the end of the day, it requires us being able to have conversations with each other, right? Like the reality is, having worked around the world with places where autocrats have taken power, they try and make people afraid. And one of the things that they try and make people afraid to do is to have conversations with other people to express how they're feeling. And that can be very subtle in a way that people are just afraid. I'm not gonna even bother talking about politics. I'll talk about the weather, or I'll talk about anything but. I think the second thing really with the app is you're never going to persuade somebody to think differently. You're only going to get them you're only going to lead them to question within themselves and come to feel differently themselves. And that requires having conversations with them. And one of the things that, to Erin's point, that we discovered in spending years researching this is that people they struggle to even know how to start the conversations. 2/3 of Americans have ended a relationship with somebody that they're friends with over politics. 1 in 5 Americans is estranged from a family member over politics. And, that comes back to communication. This gives people a safe space in which to practice conversations. And quite frankly, they don't always have to be challenging conversations. One of the things that we found since we released the tool is there are people who are looking at it and they're saying, I have a friend who isn't all that interested in politics because of what's going on and wants to change the conversation. Well, how do you ask them questions? If you just go and preach at people and you say, hey, Jeff, the State of the Union was a disaster and Jeff doesn't want to talk about it, it's either going to damage our relationship or it's going to change that relationship. But if I know, a better way about it is to say, hey, Jeff, what do you think of gas prices? I was filling up the other day, and how to probe. That is going to lead you to a place where you can start having a conversation, and maybe Jeff can see the fallacy in his ways.
Yeah. Why don't we take just a moment and provide a little more context? Describe, like a 30,000 foot, what the Democracy Investment Fund is, and this new tool, this new app, Listen to You. Just kind of tell people, why is it that you are involved with this work, and why did this tool grow out of it based on what you found through the research, what you found through all of your experience, both of you, over the decades. Trygve, in Eastern Europe and in other such places. But Erin, you being a communications expert in not just to political figures across the country, but to some of the richest, powerful foundations in meaningful, like the Paul Allen and Melinda Gates and Phil Knight and folks like that.
Well, the Democracy Investment Fund was really created and came out of the work and the research that Trygve and I have been doing for the last 5 years. And we realized that we had a lot of information, and how did we turn that information into something tangible that could actually help people and encourage them to get back in this civic dialogue game that so many of us are like, we're just turned off by it, because it feels like anything you say or do is a trap to end up in an uncomfortable conversation. So we've taken all of that and built Listen to You, which is the app we've been referring to. And the Democracy Investment Fund is really designed to take all of that knowledge and that technical expertise that we've built over the last 5 years and give people tools that they can actually use in their daily lives. I mean, one of the things I heard a lot when I was out on the fundraising trail was, just give me something to do. What can I do? Tangible. And this is really something tangible that people can do to protect and save our democracy. It's actually take a moment, do something that might be uncomfortable, start having conversations with each other again.
I found it interesting that the number one bullet point in introducing this app to people like me who were not aware of it was simply something that I learned in talk radio a long time ago, and that is listen.
It's a lost art for a lot of folks. I mean, we go into conversation intent on convincing someone of our rightness, or that we're smarter than other people, or we go in to it with such an agenda, our own agenda, and very rarely stop and go, I'm just going to listen to what someone else has to say and see where I can find common ground. I mean, that's one of the most important things we found in our research was that people, it was not an intuitive skill anymore to stop and go, man, I just heard someone say something that was really important because I took the time to listen to what they had to say.
It's an interesting contrast to the Trump style of persuasion, which is basically just the opposite. Don't listen, just keep talking and keep pushing, and don't care how the other side feels. Just keep pushing your point of view. And he's been effective with it. Donald Trump is a very effective communicator, even though, in our view at least, he's not a very effective president. How did the two go together?
The reality is, with Trump and his sort of weave, if you will, and I would say, I mean, he's not a particularly popular president, at least at the moment, but he's won on 2 occasions, right? I think part of that is, people struggle to understand at the macro level what to even believe with our politics today, right? Because no matter what happens, there's somebody out there trying to gaslight and say, don't believe what you're seeing. Part of the reason why the app is so important in terms of having conversations is the way that you break that is people in an immediate group that you do inherently trust, maybe about things other than politics, having the conversation with you. And so kind of is operating on 2 levels. When you have so much information out there, and our politics has become so much about invoking fear among people, that's happening at the 30,000-foot level. But the way that people reclaim their agency really has to happen at that 3-foot level within families, at bars, in places, like the UP, or, Ann Arbor or wherever. And so it's almost become like the sportification of football, right? Like, I'm a Wisconsin boy. I can say that, Timmer is a winner and he doesn't have a winning choice of football teams, apparently. But, we're not going to get anywhere on that. If I can lead Jeff to understand the cognitive dissonance of the fact that he tends to win all the time and his football team doesn't, and make him start to question that, maybe he'll come over come over from the dark side. So that's same is true in politics, right? Donald Trump is creating it where it's a no-win situation for people to have that conversation with people who disagree with each other. What the app is trying to do is take it out of that and again, empower people, certainly in these close relationships, to understand that when we're having this conversation now, it's, for me or for any of us, it is not only about what I'm saying, but what's more important is what are you hearing and how are you processing that? And what the app does is it enables people to actually see and think about what the other person is hearing in their words and why they may not be landing the way that they think that they are.
Sounds like a good guide for parents, too.
Well, I can tell you that when we were testing it, we're giving it away for free, and we don't track, train, or target off of people's data. But it has a lot of applications that we discovered as we were training it. I mean, as we were testing it. Everything from a student who discovered after having conversations about how to have conversations with his mother was suddenly loading up Tinder profiles of girls he was taking out. And we have had a lot of people who have used it for parenting. And I'll be honest with you, Walt, I have a 13-year-old daughter. That's a little bit of a challenging time. I actually use the app that is not closed off to talk about things beyond politics to help improve a conversation that I was having with her about how many times she had been tardy to class and that she needed to stop yapping with her friends, which I'm not against. And I tried to tell her that. But that she needed to get her butt in a seat before the bell rang. And I actually used the app, and it did help because I didn't fully get until I inputted about myself and I inputted about her in the context of the conversation. I didn't understand that the approach of me just going straight at her, you can't be tardy, was not landing. I needed to get her to understand the consequences of it and put myself in her perspective. And quite frankly, I've never been a 13-year-old girl. I have been 13-year-olds, and I might have been tardy a lot myself. I needed to lead with that and actually ask her questions that led her to see that she needed to get her butt in those seats. And the same applies in politics.
Trygve has been a guest on this podcast before, and I've explained to folks that he and I have worked very closely together, as I have worked closely with Erin over most of this last decade in the former Republican, never Trump world, and with the Lincoln Project and related organizations. And Trygve has done a good job of being kind of a reminder or conscience to me, saying, things like, do you want to be right, or do you want to actually persuade somebody? It made me kind of stop. It's not important that I'm just right in this conversation. I'm having this conversation with this person who has a different view than I do, because I want to actually have them hopefully change their behavior or way of thinking, or at least give them pause with how they perceive the world or the issue. And that's what we have to keep in mind. It is, being right, and especially with our kids, but our family, our friends, our neighbors. We want to seem informed. We want to be smart. We're very comfortable and confident in our own beliefs. And that's what we talk about, rather than listening to theirs. And when you take my ADHD brain that's always thinking about what I'm going to say next and never listening to the person I'm talking to, it's really important to use some tools and techniques and skills, develop skills like you can do with this app, 4 former Michigan governors, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, recently did this symposium on the importance of civility. And I don't have any disagreement, and Mark and I talked about this a few weeks ago. It was certainly a good thing that they were doing, but it wasn't matched. It wasn't meeting the moment that we're in our politics. It's not because necessarily we're not being civil to each other that we're where we are. But when I look at a tool like this, it is important to me, and it does kind of fit into that conversation about civility and whatnot. To tell how this works a little bit. I mean, we can't, and a podcast isn't a great way to demonstrate it, but tell how it works and where people can find it. I assume it's on the Android and, Apple app stores and all that.
They can go to www.lstn2u.us. So listen to you.us. We have put an emphasis, because we felt it was important for political conversations, to make it available to people for free. We started off, and so it's a pay it forward model. If you use the app, you can go on, use it. There's no cost, there's no tracking, there's no training, and there's no targeting of people off the data. You can go and use it. If you have the ability to cover your token costs, there's obviously token costs. If you have the ability to cover your token costs, you can make a donation. If you're willing to cover it for somebody else who can't, we're really trying to build community around this. So that's where they can get it. If we have success and we've been fortunate to have people who have been supporting the token cost to date, we're in the process of trying to raise additional money. There's obviously a cost of getting it up on Google Apps and Apple Apps, the Apple Store. That is one of the things that we want to build out, an actual app, but it will run on your phone. So you can use it that way. That's the primary way right now, is to just go online, and you can use it there. We have other features that eventually we're going to add. Right now, you have to chat with it by entering text, although you can hit the little button where you talk it like my kids do. They don't ever seem to type anymore. But eventually we'd like to roll it out so that people can actually have a conversation with it. I think that the important thing, though, Jeff, and it's one of the things that we get kind of a lot, as Erin and I, and you know this because you were there, when Erin and I first started seeing the problem, and it's nice that we're talking to people that are in Michigan. This really goes back to people in Michigan. We did a focus group in Detroit back about, it's almost 3 years ago now. And it was with dads and daughters. And I know Jeff's girl dad. I'm a girl dad. Walt, I don't know if you're a girl dad.
Yeah, granddad.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've discovered in the course of our research is that when you look at moms and sons, or moms and daughters, and what they perceive as their role, and children perceive as those parents' role, it changes over time. When your kids are little, moms tend to view their role as provider, as caretaker. They eventually become friends, but it evolves over time. Same with dads and sons. But with dads and daughters, and I know this is true of myself, and Jeff and I have had this conversation, and it was true of upwards of 80% of the dads that were in our group. They view themselves as protector. From the moment you see an ultrasound, the oldest daughter we had was 68, and her father was in her 80s in our group, that's in our research group. He still viewed himself as the protector. It's just the way that it is. And that was causing friction, because daughters who were more on the left side, and quite frankly in the center, are feeling afraid about what's happening. And the dads, when they go to the dads to have the conversation, because they see their dads as their protectors, the dads would think they were talking about politics. So you had a conversation about two different things. You had one that was about their relationship and how the world was seen, and the dads were seeing it as, this is about tax policy. So we were in Detroit. We did this focus group. I was moderating with dads who had had issues with their daughters, and afterwards, a guy who was a homicide detective in Detroit, and I really hope he's listening because I did keep my promise. He came up to me after the group, and he had tears welling up in his eyes, and he said, "You have to help me. I didn't get it, but I do now. I lost my daughter over Trump and Biden. We haven't spoken in 3 years, and I thought I wasn't listening. I didn't understand it. And then as he started almost to himself, he said, "Do you know what it's like to lose your only child?" And Erin was watching this from behind the two-sided mirror, and I do know what that's like. My wife and I lost our first child, a daughter who was stillborn at 48 weeks or 38 weeks. And so now you've got this tough Detroit homicide detective who's crying, and I'm crying, and I'm like, "I'll help you, man. I'll find a way to help you." And Erin and I were out for dinner afterwards, and I said, "We got to help that guy." And she's like, "Yeah, we do." And so we talked about a lot of different things. I mean, Jeff, you remember we had a conversation with you. Do we make videos? Do we go out and get influencers? Do we do online classes? It just so happened that around that time, ChatGPT had come out, and I was on a call with somebody, and they said, "You should put your data into ChatGPT." And I'm like, "That's a great idea." And when my daughter got home from middle school, I was like, "Do you know what this Chat SVG thing is?" And she's like, "It's ChatGPT, Dad. It's AI." And I'm like, "It's AI? Like, how do I put my data in it?" And it wasn't, it wasn't great. But eventually what we discovered is that it was really good if we loaded it up with what we had learned to have conversations, and that if somebody put in about themselves and put in about a person they were having a hard time having a conversation with in a little bit of context, they could work with that. And we went up and we met with people at MIT, and we met with people at the University of Wisconsin and a bunch of different places who were experts in the field. And we eventually, came to this realization that we could, in fact, build something, a tool like this. And really, it's not an AI tool. It's a reflection. And it's a reflection of yourself. It's a reflection of who we are more broadly. And it's empowering. It really is about getting your agency back. And I, as I was hugging it out in tears with this Detroit cop who had been a Marine and investigated homicides for his life and said I'd help him, I have no idea how to track him down, but that is what we set out to do. As we went about this, and I think Erin feels this way too, everybody that we shared our vision with was, how can I help? And for example, somebody who Erin knew, who goes back to the beginnings of artificial intelligence and technology, extremely well known, worked for the Allen Institute. He came on and said, "What can I do?" We were showing him, and he's like, "I want to help you guys with this." He's like, "I've had some hard conversations with my brother. This tool needs to happen. How can I help?" The name of it was an in-kind donation from one of the biggest, most prominent ad agencies in the world, quite frankly. People up at MIT have been helpful all over. And so that has been really heartening, because the truth of the matter is that cop in Detroit, those 1 in 5 Americans who become estranged from family members, those 2/3 who've lost friends, those of you who are listening, you're not alone in what you have. And you have an opportunity. This tool is an attempt to give you the opportunity to reclaim that agency and to share it with other people to help them reclaim their agency. And I think, we soft launched it about 2 weeks ago. We have about 4,000 people who have been using it. We have not been promoting it as heavily because we're still, raising money for tokens. And if we suddenly have millions of people using it, Trygve and Erin are going to have to go start raising money really fast. But I will tell you, we have college campuses where it's being integrated into classes at Wisconsin, at MIT. They're figuring out how to use it. We're in discussions with all kinds of other universities and colleges. We're also in conversations with some of the largest senior organizations. If we could get 200,000 people using it to practice that skill before the next election, or 1 million people who now know how to go have these conversations, that will persuade people. Because the solution to what we face in America, and I tell you this having worked in Putin's Russia, having worked in Belarus, Venezuela, if you name an autocrat, I've worked with the people who are against them. We're not going to solve this at the ballot box as much as we're going to solve it in the bars in Lansing and in Manitowoc or River Falls. Or we're going to solve it over the family dinner table. And That is what this tool does. It helps you help others who are good people who happen to have different views of politics, help them find within themselves the cognitive dissonance between what they're advocating for politically and how they live their lives.
Wow. When I got married 30 plus years ago, as part of the deal, I got 2 preteen stepdaughters, and I would have given anything to have this tool. You would have changed all of our lives. It's remarkable. And quite honestly, I hope eventually you are able to commercialize this and you get filthy rich because you can change the world with this.
Well, now after you might have created this problem for yourself here because after this podcast is published, you're going to see a spike of tens, maybe even dozens of users, who are listening to that.
I did a radio show on WTMJ, and it made me so happy. I had somebody reached out to me. It was the sister of one of my best friends growing up. Hadn't talked to her in, I hate to admit this, probably 50 years. And she reached out and she said, I'm so happy about what you're doing. And I downloaded the app because she named one of the others. They were a Catholic family of 13, but one of the other brothers who I knew who was older. And it's funny because simultaneously that brother had friended me on Facebook after he had heard about the app, and he was asking about using it for her, and she was asking about using it for him. And I've said this to Erin a million times, and it's nice that you say that, Walt, because there are a lot of other ways that the app can be used, and we've been exploring some of that. But as I said to Erin and the kids who have really put this together, we built this about a cop in Detroit. And at the end of the day, if it helps one person who's in the situation that the cop in Detroit is in, it will have made it worthwhile for everybody. And the fact that with a couple of Facebook posts and now starting to do press, we've already had, 4,000 people sign up, and every day it's 50, 80 or more. I think we can get to I had originally thought if we did 100,000 people, that would be great. I think that we can do far more than that because, as I said earlier, none of us are alone. And as you pointed out, it's needed. Of that 4,000, 400 of them are in other places around the world who are using the tool because it uses AI and because it's built off of humans and what makes us tick, real data. It's not just ChatGPT in a wrapper. It's literally based off of studying humans. Those people who are in places like Venezuela or Europe or wherever who've signed up, they can use it just as easily as people in Michigan. And there's something, American about that. And there's something, quite frankly, that's just really rewarding about it.
Erin, Dobson, Trygve, Olson, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing this, I think, very helpful, necessary, critical tool, framing this, why it's important. And, I certainly wish you nothing but success with this effort.
Thanks you so much.
And with that, we are done for this week. Our very great thanks to Erin, Dobson, and Trygve Olson for their work at the Democracy Investment Fund and their eye-opening app, which to me is revolutionary. Their commitment to more polite politics and actually better human relations to me is inspiring and exciting.
A reminder to get your free subscription. We're giving it to you to our YouTube channel. It's gluten-free and it's cost-free. Click on the link on our website at republicpodcast.com to subscribe.
In keeping with the spirit of this week's guest, we leave you with the final words of Gretchen Whitmer's 8th and final State of the State message.
Because of you, the state of our state is strong. And because of you, I know it always will be. Big Gretch out.
And if the Republic is still standing, Mark should be back next week. I will return also. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
A Republic, if you can keep it, is a copyrighted presentation of Michigan Citizens for a Better Tomorrow.